I'll start with a story. There was a man who was doing a interviewing for a telegraph job. I don't know if you remember telegraphs. They were what we had before phones, and you would send signals. It was like do 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 do, and it was an encoded signal. They would send messages across the country using these signals. So he went in for the interview. He was about 20 minutes late. So we got to the interview. He walked in and he heard a telegraph going over the speaker system. And so he knew he was in the right place, and the receptionist told him to sit down, and there were four other gentlemen sitting there. Two of them were complaining about just the way that the company was set up there and their previous jobs, and the other two were complaining the fact that they had to wait for 20 minutes. So he decided not to join them. He sat over to the side. He was there for about a minute, then he kind of looked up, and then the owner of the company was there, and the receptionist told them to wait for him to call them in for interview. He just got up and walked straight into the owner's office. And then the owner shut the door, and so the four guys were like, we've been here for 20 minutes. That's not fair. What are you doing just walking in? And 20 minutes later, the owner walks out. He said, thank you guys for coming. I've hired this gentleman. He said, well, that's not fair. We've been here. Been here waiting. And the owner said, well, I've been sending a telegraph for the last 25 minutes saying if anybody can understand this, come walk into my office. He said, and none of you guys came and walked in. And so that's kind of how we don't want to be with God. So God may be communicating with us, may be sending us signals, and we may not be listening for it. We may be too busy complaining about our problems or focused on other things that we're not actually hearing God. And I'll talk about first that God speaks in ways that we can understand. So there's a theological term called divine accommodation, which means that God will change the way he speaks in order for you to hear. I've heard it said that new Christians, that God will change how he speaks in order to talk to them. But once you become a mature Christian, he expects you to change the way you listen in order to hear him. If we look at the story of the birth of Christ, we saw God communicating in different ways. For the shepherds, he sent angels, and angels gave them a message. For Joseph, it was a dream. The Magi, they were astrologers. They weren't Jewish at all. They believed in the signs and stars, so he sent the star to tell them about the birth of Christ. And in Luke 2:25, there was a man named Simeon who God sent the Holy Spirit to tell them about the birth of Christ. And so God used different methods to speak to different people. And I know traditionally in this Bible study, there's visitors from everywhere, so I don't know where we all stand in our different doctrines. I know there's some people that believe that, there's a closed canon and that the Bible, God has spoken and he's not speaking anymore. Then there's some that may be very charismatic and believe that, God speaks in, a lot of different ways. And there's one Reformed person that said, if you want to hear God speak, read the Bible. If you want to hear God speak out loud, read the Bible out loud. But we're so I'm coming more of from a central, more centered point of view. But I'll give an example. Give a verse, John 16:13, and there are many verses like this in the New Testament. So this is Jesus talking about when the Holy Spirit comes. In John 16:13, he says, "But when he, the Spirit of truth, comes, he will guide you in all truth. For he will not speak on his own initiative, but whatever he hears, he will speak, and he will disclose to you what is to come." So Jesus is clear that the Holy Spirit will speak to us, and we know that God is the Holy Spirit. And so we know that there are many references to the Holy Spirit, and that God speaks to us in many ways. His primary communication to us is the Bible, but he can speak to us through prophecy. He can speak through us through pastors, teachers. He can speak to us through other Christians, counsel. He can speak in many different ways. He still speaks to us today. And we'll look at how God responds to prayer. How God responds to prayer. So I'll tell another story of a man who was in Hurricane Katrina. He was a Christian man. He was studying the Word, and then his TV just came on, and it was a newscaster, and the newscaster was saying there's going to be a level 5 hurricane coming into New Orleans. Everyone should evacuate and leave. And he turns the TV off. He says, I'm going to just trust in God. I'm going to trust in God.
Oh no.
And then so the storm comes, and the water start to come. Then he hears a knock on his door, and it's his neighbor, and he says, I know, we've had differences and that I haven't liked you in the past. He said, but I'm about to leave. I have a big truck. I can get us out of here. You should come with me. The guy says, no, thanks you, but I'm gonna trust in God. So then the waters got higher. It filled his apartment. He starts floating out of the window, and he's swimming. And then eventually a boat comes. The boat says, hey, get in the boat. I'll save you. He says, no, I'm going to trust in God. So he's out there for another hour. And then a helicopter comes, and the guy on the megaphone says, grab this rope. We found you. We can save you. He says, no, don't worry. I'm going to trust in God. And then another hour later, he dies. And he goes to heaven. He goes to heaven and he says, he meets God. He says, God, I trusted you. Why weren't you there for me? You didn't answer my prayer. And God says, I turned your TV on and sent the news anchor. I sent your neighbor. I sent somebody in a boat. I sent a helicopter. What else did you want? So sometimes, God can be responding to us, but we want to know how God responds. And so we're looking at today, when your prayers don't get answered. When your prayers don't get answered is the title of the lesson. And so God responds to us in 5 different ways. In 5 different ways. He can respond. He can say yes. He can say no. He can say wait. He can give us direction, guidance, or clarity. So maybe we didn't ask a yes or no question. We wanted guidance. We wanted direction on something. Or he can respond with silence. And that's the one we're uncomfortable with. Then another form of yes is a seed response. So you're praying for an oak tree, and God gives you an acorn. He gives you an acorn. So he gives you an acorn, but you have to plant it and water it and care for it, and it will eventually become an oak tree. So an example is a man, he prayed to God. He said, I want to be a world-class pianist. I want to fill concert halls. I want to be demanded around the world, and I want that to be my ministry. Then he goes for a piano lesson, and the piano instructor says, you're very talented pianist. So he had never played before in his life. He didn't know anything about music, and he said, you have a gift. You're very talented. You're better than most of my students. He said, yeah, so you should definitely probably pursue this. So hearing that, the man went home. He called the guy the next day. He canceled his lessons. He sat there and he said, I'm going to wait here now for somebody to call me and tell me they want to be my agent. And my manager, someone is telling me they want to be my manager and book Carnegie Hall, and so I can start my ministry. It's like, well, no, but he needs to go ahead and take the lessons. He needs to go ahead and practice. He needs to practice and become good. And so sometimes God said yes, but we didn't finish the lesson. So sometimes we have to make, God said yes to us, but it wasn't, he wasn't going to just lay it out for us. There's some work that we have to do, and we may not have finished the lesson, and we thought it was a no. So that's what we're looking at, the ways that God will respond, and so we'll know. And when Jenny asked me about teaching this lesson, I prayed to God that for everyone who showed up here today, that he would provide for a $2,000 gift certificate for everyone here. And I'll let you know that God answered my prayer. God answered my prayer. I don't know if Jeannie has everybody's contact information. He said no. He said no. Unfortunately, but no is an answer. So we forget that no is an answer. Some people say that their prayers didn't get answered. So if God clearly tells you no, then you got an answer. It just wasn't the answer you wanted.